The ethicality of animal testing. No, it is not ethically sound. It is ineffective and has become increasingly ineffective in current years. And it causes immense suffering towards animals and includes the environment. Testing effectiveness. Most animal tests have to go through a 14-year testing period in order to be approved for human trials. However, 95% of these tests don't make it past this date. In addition to this, in 2014 there were 85 tests that were approved for human trials for HIV/AIDS. Of these tests, none of them succeeded in human trials, or even showed relative promise in human trials. Suffering. The LD50 test is by far one of the most horrific tests done on animals. Its procedure involves attaching feeding tubes to animals in groups of 60 to 100 and force feeding them chemicals in order to determine the amount of chemical it takes for 50% of these individuals to die. Then in the cosmetics industry, the Drey's test for eye irritation involves holding rabbits and small animals down and injecting their eyes with chemicals to measure the amount of blindness, irritation, and general scarring that occurs to them. Ethics. The philosopher Immanuel Kant wrote that the ethicality of an action can be determined on how we arrive to it, as saying that the means can't justify the ends. Author C.L. Chang wrote that humanity has a duty to protect animals from suffering. Because of this, the suffering in the animal testing industry means that all of the animal testing that occurs that involves animal suffering is unethical. The environment. After an animal test has finished, the byproducts of it, which is the carcasses, the feeding, the bedding, anything of that sort, is placed into an incinerator in most facilities. This has heavy CO2 emissions, puts heavy metals into the environment, and releases carcinogens in the form of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. This can increase the cancer rates of animals in the area and of the humans in the area. Wild animal research. The 3 R's method, also known as replacement, reduction, and refinement, is put in place to maintain stability in these environments. However, there are so many variables from specimen health to researchers to the overall species and ecosystem, not to mention the community around the area, that we can't be certain that the experiment is ethical, just because it affects too many parties and we cannot ensure that none of them are affected to too much of a degree. Because of this uncertainty, it should not be continued. Alternatives. One of the most popular alternatives is organ on a chip, where we take living, breathing human cells and put them into an acrylic chip, and we put the chemicals through the chip to see how it affects the living, breathing human cells. This could be a great alternative to animal research, especially with vaccinations and other treatments of that sort. Another alternative is single-celled organisms. This is because they're the most basic molecular function of any species. One of these single-celled organisms is tetrahymena. This is because they have cilia all around them that act just as the cilia in our lungs would. So we can experiment with these single-celled organisms, which reduces the waste immensely, and these organisms can't feel pain. And by experimenting on these tetrahymena, we can also get results that correlate to the human body. In conclusion, no, it is not ethical, causes animal suffering, has become very ineffective, and is not environmentally sustainable.
Okay, thank you. What evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and why did you choose not to use it?
I gathered evidence that sort of supported that wild animal testing isn't exactly the most safe thing for the researchers, but I chose not to include it because it seemed that almost as if I was focusing mainly on what it did to the animals, not necessarily what the researchers were being. So it's less of a humanitarian essay and more of a project about the animals themselves.
Okay. Another question. What advice would you have for other researchers who are considering this topic?
I would advise them to search for animal rights organizations. I've actually found a lot from PETA, things like that, and then just looking at what other philosophers have said, especially for the ethical perspective, because I was able to use Immanuel Kant to sort of prove that animal research is unethical, rather than just saying, hey, it causes animal suffering, so it's bad. We can actually use this along with C.L. Shang to prove that's unethical.
Okay, thank you. All right, cool, hold on.